The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of Margaret Sullivan's Victorian home in Charleston, South Carolina, casting delicate shadows across the mahogany furniture that had been in her family for generations. At 62, Margaret moved with the grace of someone who had spent her life navigating the intricate social circles of Southern society. Her silver hair, perfectly coiffed in a classic bob, caught the light as she reached for the ivory envelope that had arrived the previous day. She had been expecting this invitation for months, yet holding it in her hands still felt surreal. Her son, William, her only child, was getting married. The elegant script on the envelope read, Mrs. Margaret Sullivan, in deep navy ink, and she carefully opened it with the silver letter opener that had belonged to her grandmother. As she unfolded the thick cardstock, her eyes scanned the formal wording. Mr. William James Sullivan and Miss Victoria Chen request the honor of your presence at their wedding. The date was set for 3 months from now, at the historic Magnolia Plantation. Margaret's heart swelled with a mixture of joy and something else, a twinge of uncertainty that had been growing since William had introduced her to Victoria 2 years ago. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed William's name, and she answered with genuine warmth in her voice. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said, settling into her favorite armchair by the window. "Morning, Mom. Did you get the invitation?" William's voice carried that familiar enthusiasm that reminded her of when he was a boy, excited about showing her his latest science project. "Yes, I just opened it." "It's beautiful, darling. The Magnolia Plantation is a wonderful choice." She traced her finger along the embossed flowers on the invitation. That was mostly Victoria's idea. She fell in love with the oak trees and the gardens. There was a pause, and Margaret could hear muffled voices in the background. "Actually, Mom, Victoria wants to talk to you about something." Margaret's grip on the phone tightened slightly. Her relationship with Victoria had been complicated. The young woman was accomplished, a successful marketing executive from San Francisco, but their interactions always felt strained, like two actors performing roles they hadn't quite mastered. "Margaret?" Victoria's voice came through the phone, crisp and professional as always. "I hope you're well." "I'm fine, dear. Congratulations again on the engagement. The invitation is lovely." "Thank you." Another pause. Margaret could practically hear Victoria gathering her thoughts. "I wanted to discuss something with you about the wedding. It's about the dress code." "Oh?" Margaret glanced at the invitation again, noting the black tie optional designation. "Yes, well, as you know, I'll be wearing white, of course, and I've decided that I'd like to keep that color exclusive to the bride." Victoria's tone was measured, careful. "I know some of the older generations sometimes wear cream or ivory to weddings, but I'd really prefer if you chose something in a different color family." Margaret felt her eyebrows rise. In all her years attending Southern weddings, she had never heard of such a request. "I see. You're asking me not to wear white, or cream, ivory, champagne, or anything in that spectrum." Victoria's voice became slightly sharper. "I think it's a reasonable request. It's my day, after all." The words hung in the air like humidity before a storm. Margaret had already purchased an elegant cream-colored suit with delicate pearl buttons, a classic, understated ensemble that she thought would be perfect for her son's wedding. She had imagined herself in it, standing beside William during the mother-son dance, looking timeless and appropriate. "Of course, dear," Margaret heard herself saying, though her Southern training in politeness was being severely tested. "I understand completely." "Wonderful. I knew you would." Victoria's relief was palpable. Perhaps something in navy or burgundy? Those colors would photograph well. After they hung up, Margaret sat in silence, staring at the invitation. She thought about calling her sister Helen, who lived in Savannah and would certainly have opinions about this breach of etiquette. But instead, she found herself walking to her bedroom closet, pushing aside the plastic garment bag containing the cream suit. Over the next few days, the conversation replayed in her mind. She tried shopping for a new dress, visiting the boutiques on King Street where she had shopped for decades. Navy felt too somber, burgundy too harsh against her fair complexion. Nothing felt right. It was during her weekly lunch with her book club friends that the seed of an idea was planted. They were gathered at Peninsula Grill, sharing their famous coconut cake and discussing their latest read when Margaret mentioned her dilemma. "She told you what colors you can't wear?" gasped Claudia, nearly dropping her fork. "In all my 70 years, I've never heard of such a thing." "Times are changing," offered Linda, the diplomat of the group. "Young people have different ideas about weddings now." "Different doesn't mean right," countered Joyce, who had married off 4 daughters and considered herself an expert on wedding etiquette. "The mother of the groom has certain prerogatives. This is highly unusual." Margaret sipped her sweet tea thoughtfully. "I don't want to cause problems. William is so happy." "But dear," Claudia leaned in, lowering her voice conspirationally, You can't let her walk all over you. What's next? Will she dictate what you can wear to Christmas dinner? That evening, Margaret found herself browsing online, not for navy or burgundy dresses, but reading about wedding traditions and etiquette. She learned about cultural differences, generational changes, and the evolving nature of wedding customs. But nowhere did she find any precedent for a bride forbidding the groom's mother from wearing an entire color spectrum. As the weeks passed, Margaret attended to the usual pre-wedding duties. She hosted a lovely bridal shower at her home, complete with her grandmother's china and fresh flowers from her garden. She smiled through the gift opening, made pleasant conversation with Victoria's friends from California, and played all the traditional games. But the dress issue gnawed at her. One afternoon, while shopping with Helen, who had come to visit, they passed a window display that made them both stop in their tracks. There, illuminated by spotlights, was a dress that seemed to glow with its own inner light. It was golden, not yellow, not champagne, but true gold, like captured sunlight. The fabric shimmered with subtle movement, elegant and regal. "Margaret," Helen breathed, "that dress is speaking to you." "Don't be ridiculous," Margaret replied, but she couldn't tear her eyes away. "It's too much." "Is it?" Helen studied her sister's face. "Or is it exactly enough?" They entered the boutique and Margaret found herself trying on the golden dress. It fit as if it had been tailored for her, the color bringing out the warmth in her skin and making her silver hair look deliberately stylish rather than simply aging. In the mirror, she saw not the accommodating mother of the groom she had been trying to be, but the woman she actually was, strong, elegant, and unwilling to be diminished. "It's perfect," the saleswoman gushed. "You look like royalty." Margaret turned, watching the fabric catch the light. She thought about Victoria's decree, about the cream suit hanging unworn in her closet, about all the times in the past 2 years she had bitten her tongue and smiled politely when Victoria had made subtle digs about the South, about tradition, about the way Margaret had raised William. "I'll take it," she heard herself say. As Helen zipped up the garment bag, she gave Margaret a knowing look. "You're not just buying a dress, are you?" Margaret's smile was enigmatic. Perhaps not. The purchase should have brought her peace, but instead, it intensified her internal conflict. Late at night, she would lie awake thinking about William, about the boy who had helped her plant tomatoes in the backyard, who had cried on her shoulder after his first heartbreak, who had called her every Sunday without fail through college and graduate school. She didn't want to ruin his wedding day, but she also thought about respect, about boundaries, about the message she would send if she simply acquiesced to every demand. The golden dress hung in her closet like a question mark, beautiful and defiant. 2 weeks before the wedding, William came to visit alone. They sat on the back porch, drinking lemonade and watching the evening light fade over the garden. He seemed nervous, fidgeting with his glass. "Mom," he finally said, "I wanted to talk to you about the wedding." Margaret's heart raced, but she kept her voice calm. "What about it, darling?" "Victoria mentioned she talked to you about the dress thing." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "I know it might seem unusual. That's one word for it," Margaret said mildly. William sighed, running his hand through his hair in a gesture she recognized from his childhood. "She's just stressed about everything being perfect. Her family, they have certain expectations, and she wants to make sure she stands out as the bride." "William?" Margaret set down her glass and looked at her son directly. "Do you really think anyone would confuse me for the bride?" He laughed despite himself. "No, of course not. I told her that. But she's got this idea in her head, and you know how she can be when she's decided on something." Yes, Margaret thought. I do know. She had watched Victoria orchestrate their entire relationship, from where they lived to what car William drove. Her son, brilliant in his work as an engineer, seemed to lose all backbone when it came to his fiancée. "I just want everyone to be happy," William continued. "It's one day, Mom. Can't we just go along with it?" Looking at her son's pleading face, Margaret felt a surge of love and frustration. She wanted to shake him, to tell him that marriage was about compromise on both sides, not just constant capitulation, but she also saw the man he had become. Successful, kind, perhaps too eager to please, but good-hearted. "I've already bought a new dress," she said finally. "You don't need to worry." Relief washed over William's features. "Thanks, Mom. I knew I could count on you to understand." After he left, Margaret stood before her closet, looking at the golden dress. Understanding and accepting were two different things. She understood Victoria's insecurity, her need for control, her desire to be the center of attention. But accepting it, endorsing it by complying meekly, that was another matter entirely. The week before the wedding, Margaret attended the rehearsal dinner, wearing a simple black cocktail dress that no one could object to. She gave a lovely toast, speaking about William's childhood, his achievements, and her joy at seeing him find love. She did not mention the dress decree or any of the other small slights she had endured. Victoria seemed pleased, even going so far as to air-kiss Margaret's cheek at the end of the evening. But as Margaret drove home through the quiet Charleston streets, she knew her decision was made. The golden dress waited in her closet, and in 3 days, she would wear it. Not out of spite exactly, but out of a need to maintain her dignity, to show that grace and accommodation had limits. She thought about the reactions it might provoke, the whispers it might generate, but she also thought about the woman she had seen in the boutique mirror, confident, elegant, refusing to be erased or diminished. That woman deserved to attend her only son's wedding. The morning before the wedding, Margaret received a text from Victoria. Just a reminder about our conversation regarding dress colors. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Margaret stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Tomorrow would come soon enough, and with it, whatever consequences her choice would bring. But tonight she would sleep peacefully, knowing that sometimes standing up for yourself looked like a golden dress, shimmering with its own light, refusing to be dimmed. Tentar novamente gaucaditar. Chapter 2. The Golden Hour. The morning of William's wedding dawned clear and bright, with the kind of crisp October air that made Charleston feel like a city suspended in amber. Margaret stood before her bathroom mirror at 6 a.m., her hands steady as she applied her skincare routine, a ritual she had maintained for 40 years. Today, every gesture felt weighted with significance. Her hairdresser, Roberto, arrived at 7 sharp, carrying his leather case of tools like a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation. He had styled her hair for every important event in the past 2 decades, and he knew without being told that today required something special. The golden dress? He asked, having heard about it during her last appointment. The Charleston hairdressing community was better than any newspaper for spreading information. Yes, Margaret confirmed, meeting his eyes in the mirror. Roberto nodded approvingly. Then we create a crown worthy of a queen. As he worked, sweeping her silver hair into an elegant French twist with delicate tendrils framing her face, Margaret's phone buzzed intermittently. Messages from family members confirming arrival times, a sweet text from William saying he couldn't wait to see her, and nothing from Victoria, though Margaret hadn't expected anything beyond yesterday's reminder. Helen arrived at 9, carrying coffee and pastries from Margaret's favorite bakery. She took one look at her sister and whistled low. "You're really going through with it. Did you doubt I would?" Margaret accepted the coffee gratefully. Not for a second. Helen settled into the chair beside her. "But I did wonder if you might have a last-minute change of heart. You've always been the peacekeeper in the family." Margaret considered this as Roberto pinned the last section of hair into place. "Perhaps it's time I retired from that role." The makeup artist arrived next, followed by the photographer William had hired to capture the getting-ready moments. Margaret submitted to their ministrations with practiced ease, all while maintaining the kind of pleasant conversation that revealed nothing of her inner thoughts. This was a skill every Southern woman of her generation had mastered, the ability to appear completely serene while navigating an emotional minefield. At 10:30, it was time for the dress. Helen helped her step into it, zipping up the back with ceremonial precision. The golden fabric settled around Margaret like liquid sunlight, transforming her from a well-preserved woman in her 60s to something altogether more formidable. The photographer's assistant actually gasped. "Mrs. Sullivan, you look absolutely stunning," the photographer said, already adjusting his camera settings. "The light with that dress, it's perfect." Margaret smiled, allowing him to position her by the window where the morning light would catch the fabric just so. In the photographs she knew, she would appear to be glowing. The thought gave her a small, private satisfaction. Her phone rang as she was fastening her pearl necklace, a wedding gift from William's father, gone now for 10 years. The caller ID showed her cousin Patricia, who was already at the venue. "Margaret, darling, I'm here early helping with some of the arrangements. And I just wanted to check." Patricia paused meaningfully. "What color did you decide on for your dress?" "Why do you ask?" Margaret kept her tone light. "Oh, no reason. It's just that Victoria's mother mentioned something about color coordination for the photos, and I wanted to make sure there wouldn't be any surprises." Margaret caught Helen's eye in the mirror. "Tell her not to worry. Everything will be perfectly coordinated." After ending the call, Helen shook her head. "The drums are already beating. This is going to be more interesting than I thought." The drive to Magnolia Plantation took 30 minutes, winding through streets lined with live oaks dripping with Spanish moss. Margaret had requested a specific route, one that would take them past the church where she had married William's father, past the hospital where William had been born, past the park where she had taught him to ride a bicycle. It was a journey through memory, each landmark a reminder of the life she had built, the son she had raised, the grace she had always shown, until today. They arrived at the plantation at precisely noon, 2 hours before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. The venue was already bustling with activity, florists making final adjustments, the wedding planner barking orders into her headset, early guests beginning to mill about the grounds. Margaret remained in the car for a moment, gathering her courage. "Ready?" Helen asked softly. "As I'll ever be." Margaret emerged from the car like a general stepping onto a battlefield. The effect was immediate. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The wedding planner, a formidable woman named Constance, whom Margaret had known socially for years, actually dropped her clipboard. "Margaret," Constance recovered quickly, though her eyes remained fixed on the golden dress. "You look extraordinary." "Thank you." "Dear, where would you like me?" Constance consulted her schedule with slightly shaking hands. The family photos aren't for another hour. Perhaps you'd like to wait in the bridal suite. I mean, the family room, the designated family waiting area." Margaret smiled serenely. "That would be lovely." The walk to the house felt like a royal procession. Staff members stopped what they were doing to stare. Early arriving guests whispered behind their hands. Margaret kept her head high, her movements graceful, acknowledging greetings with the same warm charm she always displayed. The family waiting area turned out to be a beautifully appointed parlor overlooking the gardens. Several of William's cousins were already there, and their reaction to Margaret's entrance was almost comical. Young Bradley, William's cousin from Atlanta, actually stood up as if royalty had entered the room. "Aunt Margaret," he stammered. "You look, wow." "Thank you, Bradley. How's medical school treating you?" She settled into conversation as if nothing were unusual, asking after family members, admiring photos on phones, dispensing the kind of attention and warmth that had always made her beloved in the family. But she could feel the undercurrent of tension, the unasked questions, the glances at her dress that sparkled and shimmered with every movement. William arrived at 12:45, looking handsome in his classic black tuxedo. His face when he saw her was a study in conflicting emotions: love, pride, and unmistakable concern. "Mom," he said, kissing her cheek, "you look beautiful." "Thank you, darling. You look very handsome yourself." She straightened his bow tie, a gesture she had been performing since his first school dance. He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Mom, the dress, it's gorgeous, but it's very gold." "Yes, I suppose it is. Victoria might—" He stopped himself, running a hand through his carefully styled hair. "I mean, it's not white or cream, so technically—" "Exactly," Margaret agreed pleasantly. "I followed her request to the letter." William looked like he wanted to say more, but the photographer appeared, requesting family photos in the garden. As they walked outside, Margaret noticed Victoria's family beginning to arrive. Her future in-laws were from San Francisco, sleek, modern people who looked slightly out of place among the antebellum splendor of the plantation. Victoria's mother, a thin woman named Diane who worked in tech, was wearing a predictable navy blue sheath. The photo session was an exercise in careful choreography. The photographer positioned family members in various combinations, always being mindful of where to place Margaret so her golden dress wouldn't dominate the frame. It was, she realized, probably futile. The dress commanded attention like the sun commanded the sky. Perhaps Mrs. Sullivan could stand slightly behind, the photographer suggested at one point. "I think Mrs. Sullivan looks perfect exactly where she is," interrupted Helen, who had been watching with barely concealed amusement. It was during a break in the photos that Margaret first encountered Victoria. The bride emerged from the house in a silk robe, her hair and makeup flawless, clearly coming to check on the photo progress. She stopped dead when she saw Margaret. For a moment, the two women simply looked at each other across the manicured lawn. Victoria's face cycled through several expressions: shock, anger, a flash of something that might have been admiration, before settling into a mask of forced calm. "Margaret," she said, approaching slowly. "What an interesting choice of dress." "Thank you, dear. You look lovely. Is everything going well with your preparations?" Victoria's smile was sharp as crystal. "Everything's perfect, though I do hope you understand that such a bold color might draw attention in the photos." "Oh, I shouldn't think so," Margaret replied mildly. "After all, everyone will be looking at the bride, as they should be." The two women stood there, the tension between them almost visible, like heat shimmer rising from summer asphalt. Around them, family members pretended to be deeply interested in the garden landscaping. "If you'll excuse me," Victoria said finally, her voice clipped, "I need to finish getting ready." As she walked away, Her maid of honor, a young woman named Jessica, whom Margaret had met at the bridal shower, fell into step beside her. Margaret couldn't hear their conversation, but she could see Victoria's animated gestures, the way Jessica kept glancing back at Margaret with wide eyes. "Well," said Helen, appearing at Margaret's elbow. "That went better than I expected. No bloodshed, at least." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. More guests arrived. The ceremony space was given final touches, and the string quartet began their warm-up. Margaret greeted everyone with her usual grace, accepting compliments on her dress with modest thanks, never acknowledging the underlying current of drama that everyone could sense. At 1:30, she was summoned to the bridal suite. Victoria wanted to speak with her privately. Margaret climbed the stairs slowly, wondering if this would be the confrontation she had been both expecting and dreading. The bridal suite was a flurry of activity. Bridesmaids in matching lavender dresses, hair and makeup artists making final touches, champagne glasses scattered on every surface. Victoria stood in the center of it all, now fully dressed in her wedding gown. It was undeniably beautiful, a fitted mermaid style with intricate beadwork that probably cost more than Margaret's car. "Could you give us a moment?" Victoria asked her bridesmaids, who filed out reluctantly, clearly disappointed to miss the drama. When they were alone, Victoria turned to face Margaret fully. "I asked you not to wear white, and I didn't," Margaret replied calmly. "This is gold. You know what I meant. I asked you not to draw attention." Margaret considered her response carefully. "Victoria, I've spent the last 2 years watching you manage every aspect of William's life. I've been gracious about your comments on my home, my traditions, the way I raised my son. I've accommodated your wishes at every turn, but I will not be erased at my only child's wedding." Victoria's perfect composure cracked slightly. "Erased? I asked you not to wear one color. You asked me to dim my light so yours could shine brighter," Margaret corrected gently. "But dear, that's not how light works. My brightness doesn't diminish yours. If anything, it should complement it." For a moment, Victoria looked very young, a scared girl playing dress-up in an expensive gown. Then her armor snapped back into place. "William will be upset," she said, playing her final card. "William," Margaret said firmly, "needs to learn that keeping peace at any cost isn't the same as happiness. I hope you both learn that before it's too late." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "You make a beautiful bride, Victoria. I hope you'll allow yourself to enjoy it instead of worrying about an old woman's dress." Margaret descended the stairs feeling lighter than she had in months. Whatever happened next, she had said her piece. The golden dress swished around her legs like armor made of sunlight. The ceremony was scheduled to begin in 20 minutes. Guests were taking their seats, the string quartet was playing something classical and soothing, and the October sun was at the perfect angle to bathe everything in warm light. Margaret took her designated seat in the front row, head high, shoulders back, every inch the Queen Roberto had declared her to be. As the music changed to signal the beginning of the processional, Margaret caught sight of herself in one of the decorative mirrors placed around the venue. The woman looking back at her was radiant, not in spite of her age, but because of it. Every line on her face told a story. Every silver hair was earned through experience. The golden dress was never about upstaging anyone. It was about refusing to disappear. The wedding march began, and Margaret turned with everyone else to watch the bridal party's entrance. But she could feel the eyes on her too, the whispers that rippled through the crowd like wind through leaves. She had made her choice, and now she would live with the consequences, whatever those might be. Tentar novamente. Gawk editor. Chapter 3. The reception. The ceremony itself had proceeded without incident, or at least, without any incident beyond the subtle undercurrent of tension that seemed to follow Margaret's golden presence like a shadow. William and Victoria had exchanged their vows beneath an arch of white roses and eucalyptus, the October sun filtering through the ancient oak trees in a way that photographers dream about. Margaret had cried at all the appropriate moments, her tears genuine despite everything else. Now, as cocktail hour began on the plantation's sweeping veranda, Margaret found herself at the center of a subtle but undeniable gravitational pull. Guests orbited around her, some drawn by curiosity, others by the simple magnetism of her presence in that remarkable dress. "Margaret Sullivan, you devil," drawled Eugenia Worthington, one of Charleston's grande dames and a woman who had never minced words in her 83 years. "That dress is a declaration of war, and we both know it." Margaret accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server, her movements elegant and unhurried. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean, Eugenia. It's a wedding, not a battlefield." Eugenia's laugh was like crystal breaking. "My dear, they're often one and the same, and from what I hear, your new daughter-in-law fired the first shot." The story, Margaret realized, had already made the rounds. Charleston society was like a finely tuned instrument, and gossip was its preferred melody. She wondered how many versions of the story were circulating, each one likely more dramatic than the last. "She's young," Margaret said diplomatically. "She'll learn." "Will she?" Eugenia's shrewd eyes studied Margaret over her champagne flute. "Or will William learn first? That boy of yours needs to grow a spine before that girl turns him into something unrecognizable." Before Margaret could respond, she was approached by Victoria's parents. Diane and Richard Chen were a study in modern professional success. He was a venture capitalist, she was a VP at a tech firm, and both looked like they'd rather be anywhere else than at a southern plantation wedding. "Margaret," Diane's smile was as thin as her figure. "We've heard so much about you. All good things, I hope." Margaret's own smile was warmth itself, giving nothing away. "Of course." Richard's eyes kept drifting to her dress. "That's quite a statement piece you're wearing. How kind of you to notice. I fell in love with it the moment I saw it." Margaret turned slightly, letting the fabric catch the light. "There's something about gold, isn't there? It's the color of celebration." Diane's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Victoria mentioned you originally planned to wear cream." "Plans change," Margaret said lightly. "I'm sure you understand, being from the tech industry. Isn't pivoting considered a virtue in your world?" The conversation continued in this vein, polite words with sharp edges, meanings layered beneath meanings. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Margaret had spent her entire life mastering this kind of verbal dance, but rarely had the stakes felt quite so personal. Helen appeared at her elbow as the Chens moved away. "You're enjoying this." "I'm enjoying standing up for myself," Margaret corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there? Because from where I'm standing, you look like a woman who's discovered she's been playing checkers when she could have been playing chess all along." The cocktail hour was coming to an end, and guests were being ushered toward the reception tent. It was a magnificent structure, billowing white fabric, crystal chandeliers, and centerpieces that must have cost a fortune. Margaret found her place card at table 2, positioned with other family members but notably distant from the head table. As she took her seat, she noticed the photographer hovering nearby, clearly torn between his artistic instincts and what were probably very specific instructions about minimizing her presence in the photos. She gave him a warm smile and a slight nod, permission to do his job however he saw fit. Dinner service began with William and Victoria's grand entrance. They looked undeniably beautiful together. He tall and handsome in his tuxedo, she radiant in her designer gown. But Margaret noticed the tension in William's shoulders, the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. She knew her son better than anyone, could read his moods like a familiar book. The toasts began with the best man, William's college roommate James, who told charming stories about their friendship, and William's first mentions of Victoria. Then came the maid of honor, who spoke about Victoria's determination and how she always got what she wanted, a comment that landed differently than perhaps intended. When it came time for the parents' toasts, Richard Chen spoke first, giving a polished speech about success and partnership that sounded like it could have been delivered at a shareholders' meeting. Then it was Margaret's turn. She rose slowly, the golden dress catching every light in the room. The tent fell silent. That particular quality of quiet that comes when people are witnessing something they know they'll be talking about later. "When William was 7, she began, her voice carrying clearly without the need for amplification, "he found a bird with a broken wing in our garden. He insisted on nursing it back to health.